views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey everybody, it is time for the Bronx Buzz, and we are thrilled to be with you. You may or may not know, but this is the program where BronxNet takes a look at all of the journalists and photographers and people who cover news and entertainment and everything else in the Bronx. And we give you a little insight as to who they are, what they're thinking about, and helps you kind of understand a little more about what you're reading when you read what they are reporting. And so we are going to start off tonight with my good friend Jarrett Murphy, who is the editor of City Limits. Always good to have you on the show, Jarrett. How are you?
It's always a pleasure to be on, Gary.
Thank you very much. The story I want to get right to is what happened yesterday when Mayor de Blasio announced, in many ways, a long-awaited dismantling of Rikers Island, but very particular to the Bronx. I mean, he selected, I guess, 5 sites, and one of those he selected and earmarked for 320 Concord Avenue in Mott Haven. Let's just start there with the announcement and the process that led us to the point where Rikers Island is going to be taken apart, the fact that it was supposed to take a while and now it's happening. Give us a little background and what you know about that part of it, and then we'll get into the specifics of where it's going to be located, or that he says it's going to be located in the Bronx.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is a conversation that really began in 2015 when people in the city with some influence began suggesting it was time to close Rikers in light of all the trouble that was documented by the New York Times and the U.S. Attorney about how teenagers are treated there, mentally ill, all the violence. And that set into motion a process that culminated last April with Mayor de Blasio on the eve of a commission report that was almost certainly going to recommend and did recommend closing Rikers. Mayor de Blasio, who had resisted that idea for a long time, said, yes, we should close it sometime in the next 10 years, and slowly began to articulate his plan. He's been criticized for moving too slowly, for 10 years being too long, and for not specifying exactly where the replacement facilities would be. The idea is to get the population of Rikers down to around 7,000 and then begin moving people off to borough-based facilities and eventually get the population down to 5,000 or so. Yesterday, ahead of another state report that was going to fault the city for moving too slowly, de Blasio did announce 4 sites for these borough jails, Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan, on sites that are currently occupied by either operating or formerly operating lockups and smaller jail facilities. The Bronx is unique in that it's the only place where they'll be building a new jail, and it's on, as you said, this Concourse Avenue site, which is right now the Bronx tow pound. Anyone who's had their car towed has spent a miserable time there setting it free.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that you have not said, although you've suggested, and that is that he was accused of moving too slow, but beginning with yesterday, I think he's being accused of moving too fast, right? I mean, that's why I smiled when you said that, because, he was accused of moving too slow. Now, all of a sudden, we have locations picked, and whoa, it's like, here, this is where we're putting it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and there was some upset about that. The district in which this proposed jail will fall is actually that one represented formerly by the Speaker, Melissa Margarito, is the Bronx side of that East Harlem/Bronx district. Now it's represented by Diana Ayala. She indicated some misgivings about the plan. Rafael Salamanca, who represents the district that starts literally feet away from that and is the chairman of land use, found out about the site only about a day before the press conference. The borough president said that he was basically not informed at all. And now there's going to be a process where instead of each borough getting to weigh in on the site, all 4 of the sites are going to be considered within the same public review, which is a very interesting dynamic, I think pretty much unprecedented in terms of city land use decisions. And of course, the elephant in the room is that there is no jail proposed for Staten Island, which is likely a political decision that the mayor has cast as a one driven by policy. But for people who want to see a fair share in the city, especially people in the Bronx who say there are already plenty of city infrastructure facilities in that area, the lack of a Staten Island proposal kind of grates on them.
So I want to get into that specific area and what's in that area, but I do have to back up. And I remember I commentated in whatever format I had the opportunity to, whether it was on Bronx Talk or here. When Mayor de Blasio ran initially, he touted himself as being a progressive. This to me is the same kind of style, top-down decision-making that we would have gotten from Rudy Giuliani or Michael Bloomberg. I thought the borough president's response was completely appropriate. And I don't mean, frankly, to pile on to Mayor de Blasio, but I can't imagine in this borough, at this time, in that particular part of the Bronx, that anybody would think of doing something like that without a consultation with any number of people. It's such a sensitive part of the Bronx. It frankly was incredibly surprising to me, just on a policy point of view, that would have happened without even, hello, Ruben, this is what we're planning. What do you think? I mean, it was surprising. It was not progressive, let's put it that way. I guess that's the point I'm making.
Progressive or not, I just don't think it was very smart. I don't know why it was done that way. I don't know how much haste this was put together in. A lot of questions about that. I think what's interesting, Gary, is that we're going to see here a real tension about what it means to be progressive and how much of that is about means versus ends. The progressive goal of shutting Rikers and then and doing so on a relatively speedy timetable. And then the progressive principle of, respecting some community control and making sure people are consulted and heard in the process. I mean, I think you're gonna see the potential of some tension between those kind of twin pillars of progressive urban thinking over the next few months, however long this plays out in.
Measuring the politics, and I really want to get into that, that space in particular. It is in Diana Ayala's district. And I noted in the review by the Mott Haven Herald, and they did a wonderful job, just quickly getting comments. Hers were the most measured, and whereas Rafael Salamanca, who is the land use chair, that's another whole issue, and Ruben Diaz Jr. came right out and said, this is not a good idea. She was much more measured, said, well, these things need to be considered and all that kind of thing. And so, maybe there was some conversation there that, didn't, what can I tell you, that
I think
paved
also,
the way.
I mean, another part of it, Gary, is remember that, Diana Ayala is very much the protege of her predecessor, Melissa Mark-Viverito.
Absolutely.
Who is if there was one person who was most responsible for the city moving toward adopting closing Rikers as its stated goal, it's Melissa Mark-Viverito. And so I think for Ayala, she's kind of caught between, wanting to make sure her district is respected, to make sure that other needs are taken care of. But also I think there's got to be, for her personally and kind of in her political pedigree, real respect for that goal, and acknowledging that the biggest obstacle to closing Rikers has always been the potential for a real NIMBY backlash to the location of jails. I think that's got to be part of her thinking.
Yeah, although you articulated it right at the top by saying that the ones in Queens, Manhattan, and Brooklyn are existing correctional facilities, this would, of course, be a new one. I think sometimes it's kind of ironic when you hear about, let's say, the tax cuts, and some people on the right complain it's not conservative enough, and certainly people on the left say, well, this is certainly not acceptable. I get the sense that this particular spot, there are advocates who are very protective of the neighborhood, and they wouldn't want it there for, I guess, very obvious reasons. But on the other side, people who are pro-development, that whole section of the Bronx, just south of where that's located, and just, I guess it's west of where that's located, those are going to be developed with market rate housing. This would seem to be the worst sales element to put in there if you're really trying to attract people who are going to, build maybe a different profile of the Bronx. Seems to me that everybody has a reason to not like this particular spot.
Well, I think that there's something to that, but also people would say, well, there are misconceptions about what a jail means to a neighborhood.
That's good.
A lot of the jails in Manhattan are the one that's down near City Hall that would be expanded. That's pretty well integrated into the neighborhood. You barely notice that it's a jail. And also, right now there's a tow pound there, so it's not exactly like Luxembourg Gardens at that site now in terms of having development adjacent to or nearby it. I don't know that a new facility, maybe that has security amenities built into it, would be more of a detriment than what is there now. I don't know. I think there's an open question.
And history in the Bronx, and in not quite that spot in the Bronx, but of course Spofford, when the old one on Hunts Point was relocated, it was put right on 149th Street, right off 3rd Avenue. And, I guess we'd have to do a little research because I know there was a little upsetness about that. I remember interviewing Congressman Serrano many years ago, and he was like, wait a minute, you're moving it from there and you're putting it here? And I don't know, it still is a facility of sorts. I wonder if it does hurt a neighborhood because it's self-contained.
That's part of the whole rationale for closing Rikers, but I think it's also about keeping it close to the courthouse. That's the rationale
you're correct.
The other site to make it easy to go back and forth. And one thing I mentioned, Gary, is that Spofford is no longer that facility, but what
that's true.
Salamanca and others are concerned about is there is still a youth detention facility called Horizon on 149th Street. It's going to expand to, take on some of the additional inmates, generated by the Raise the Age movement. There also already is very nearby the Vernon C. Bain barge, which is a jail barge. It was supposed to be temporary. That was 25 years ago. It's still there. It has prisoners or inmates that would otherwise be on Rikers on it. So there are at least 2 correctional facilities within a good stone's throw from this proposed site. And I think that's part of what goes into the fair share concerns about this site location.
Right, and that is what Councilmember Salamanca was concerned about. I guess we'll conclude this way, Jarrett. Of course, both you and I will be watching very closely as to how this plays out. But reform of the entire penal system, the correctional system, the criminal justice system in the Bronx, the taking down of Rikers, I personally think it's a good thing. And if we can get fresh eyes to look at this and figure out how to do it better, I think we'll all have done something well. Let's put it that way.
Amen to that.
All right. Jarrett, we will see you around town, and thanks for all the great work you do. Folks, check out citylimits.org. They just do an unbelievable job. And Jarrett, so we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gary. Take care.
Okay, great. All right, we are going to take a break now, right? Then we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, change hats, do something totally different, and bring on a photographer, reporter from the Riverdale Press. So don't you go away. We'll be back with The Buzz.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self, and I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything.
Oh, sorry.
Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa, master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and we're going to talk. We're going up to the northwest part of the Bronx. I got my papers here, and we're going to talk about the Riverdale Press. And you know, you may not be aware because we always talk to Michael Hinman on here, but Julius Constantine Motal,
Yeah.
who is a tremendous photographer, and I wasn't even aware that he'd been writing stories for the paper as
Yeah.
well. Congratulations for all that great work
Thank
that
you,
you've been
thank
doing. How long have you been with the Riverdale Press?
It's been about 10 months now. I got the job there April of last year.
Just so people can get to meet you and know
Sure.
who you are, a little background. What did you do before you got to the Riverdale Press?
Before I got to the Riverdale Press, I was freelancing for a while in New York City for a couple of publications. And before that, for about a year and a half, 2 years, I was actually living in Istanbul, Turkey, which is where my career kind of got started after I got my master's in journalism at the end of 2014.
And why and how did you end up all the way over there?
All the way over there. Love and work. It kind of worked out together. My program was about a year and a half, and I had a summer internship in Istanbul. And it kind of worked out that I could move there after I finished the program.
And you know, listen, we could do a whole show about what life was like. Give us something about what it was like to be there, what it was like to cover stories there, to learn journalism there, as opposed to maybe what it would be like here.
Yeah, I had always been interested in living and working internationally. For about the first 7-8 months, I was working for a magazine, Time Out Istanbul, which, if you know Time Out New York, it's a similar kind of thing. And alongside working on arts and culture stories, I was also photographing and reporting on protests and the political process there because it was going through a period of tremendous change for the years 2015 and 2016 that I was there. So it was fascinating living in a different country, in a different culture.
And you wrote in English?
Yes, yeah. I wrote for Western publications. I wrote for places like Mashable,
Time Out
Quartz.
Yeah. Very, very, very interesting. Well, so you've been doing tremendous work at the Riverdale Press, and folks have seen his photographs, I'm sure. One of the stories, and we were just chatting about it, we have some photos we're going to show you as well, because fires in the Bronx, for the wrong reason, for the sad reason, are becoming, we're taking more focus on them. There was a discussion today about new ways of preventing fires. And Julius, you did a story about a fire on Broadway, North Broadway.
Yes.
So it's this one that was a week or two ago, right?
Last month.
Last month, all right. And tell us a little bit about the story, and then we'll show some of the photos.
So I was working with reporter Tiffany Moustakis. She had learned of a GoFundMe page that had been started for this woman and her family, Anna Anderson, who had suffered a fire in their home, in their apartment. And they all survived, which was good, but they've, for the while at least, lost their home, and they're living with Anna's mother down by Yankee Stadium.
And let me just interject, if you will. It is a story we are unfortunately seeing more of, considering the fire in Belmont, the one over there on, what was it, Commonwealth Avenue. We've just had too much of it, but this is becoming I don't want to say, but a commonplace sort of thing in the Bronx.
Yeah. No, it's tragic. And I had arranged to meet with Anna, actually, at her apartment that was just completely burned out. I don't know what it looked like before. I knew what it looked like after. And to be in that space was really. And
she was there, not living there, but she was there visiting, as it were. Or
to show me around, to show me
what it was like,
where it had happened, what it was like. I mean, she's grateful that she and her family are all safe, they're all alive, but it's, you know, to be uprooted like that is jarring.
And you know, we expect, and I know this, of course, from many different angles, we expect reporters to just kind of go, well, you do and you tell the story, you know. And I know when you see something like that, it's hard to be distant. You know,
Yeah.
you're supposed to be distant. You're supposed to be above it all. But it's very hard to do that when you walk in and you if you're
Right.
human, you
Yeah,
can't
no,
help
yeah,
but,
of course.
but have feelings about it. So you took some photos, which we're going to
Yeah.
take a look at. So let's take a look at a couple of those photos. I guess for you, it's a good situation because you're a good photographer.
Thank you.
And as opposed to me, if I was there, I'd say, "Hey, are they sending a photographer with me?" Anyway, can we show those photos? We just took a look. Oh, here we go. So here is one. This is of the woman Anna Anderson. We're waiting for it to get up on the screen. There it is. Tell me a little bit about, first of all, from a photographer's point of view, did you mess with the lighting at all to create a dramatic effect?
No,
or you were fortunate to get it nice and
that
natural?
that was just the lighting in the apartment. So I tend to work very quietly. I tend to slip into the background because, I mean, there are times that call for sort of pose portraits, but I'm more about capturing people as they are in the moment.
Well, any good news photographer,
sure,
of course, would do that.
Yeah, but we were talking, and she had her hand on the chair, and she was just kind of like looking out at what her living space was like.
And listen, aside from the drama of it, if you know anything about it, look at the composition of it with the pizza box and just the way that, I don't know what that is, a screen or something in the top left corner.
Painting, I think.
A painting or something that's up there. It's really, it creates a tremendous amount of drama and tells its own story about what you were just describing. All right, let's do another one. What else have we got here? Well, this tells a very obvious story, I guess. This was in the front of the apartment?
So you make a right from the front door and then make a left, and that's the door to the room where the fire had started. I think it was Anna's bedroom, and that was the room I couldn't get access to, probably for good reason, and that's okay.
Do we know, has there been a conclusion by the fire marshals about why this started?
I don't know the exact circumstances of the fire, but it was fortunately contained and dealt with quickly, and there's no damage to the rest of the building. It's just contained to the apartment.
To her apartment, okay.
Yeah.
And one more, I think we have another photo. This is, to me, a very dramatic photo. It's a rather common look at somebody's bed, but you know, the combination of dark and light. You want to make a comment about it?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, this was the daughter's bedroom, and it seems that when the FDNY is responding to help, I guess, sort of clear the fire or get the smoke out or whatever, they break the windows, which is what's happening there.
Right. You could see that it's been covered over with paper or wax or cellophane or something.
And everything was left as it was when they left the apartment. They haven't
you know, I've been in some circumstances like that. It's like walking into a museum, isn't it?
A museum
there's something eerie about it.
Or a movie set.
Yes,
it was a particular. I'd never been in that situation before. I'd never been in a burned out apartment, house, anything. So to be sort of like walking and moving very carefully in that space. It's
what are the and we'll move on from this.
Sure.
But what are the prospects for this woman and moving back into the apartment, or
it seems like there's a timeline for it to get fixed. She's probably going to be out of there for about maybe 2 more months, 3 more months.
You like taking pictures more than writing, or you like writing more than pictures, or it's a combination thereof?
It's a combination of two. I had studied writing initially for my bachelor's, creative writing, fiction, and then it was when I went to graduate school for journalism that I wanted to find some perfect combination of writing and photography.
Well, you know, nowadays, and we have talked about this with other reporters on the show, nowadays, in so many cases, they ask reporters to do more.
Right.
You got to do your Facebook Live, and you know, you got to. Everybody wants video now, so you got to show a video. So I'm sure that skill comes in handy.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, because I met you and originally thought you were just the photographer
for
the Riverdale Press. Do they send? Does Michael Hinman send you out on assignments for photography more, or for writing, or for both?
Well,
and if you don't like what he is, I'll call him up and say, "Hey, Michael, what up?"
No. My title at the press is chief photographer, and I am effectively a one-person photo department. So My main responsibilities.
That's the answer to my question.
Yeah. My main responsibilities are making sure that all the reporters' stories have pictures, whether I take them or I assign a freelancer to take them.
I see.
So any stories I've written have been sort of slow burn, long form stories that I can take a couple of weeks or maybe a month or two to work on.
Tell me about, listen, there's a bunch of other stories. We don't have a ton of time. Just tell me about favorites. I got a bunch of them here.
Yeah.
What's a favorite story that you've done that you want to talk about, that you've written about? That you want to talk about?
Yeah. So the one you're holding there now called
Sleepless Nights and Walkie-Talkies.
Yeah, so I was out with a reporter for a different story about this organization that's now called Mosaic Mental Health. They were originally called the Riverdale Mental Health Association, and it was a story just about the name change. And we were sitting there with the director and talking about the organization.
So what made you say, you know what, I want to talk about this? What do you like about that story?
What had happened was the director had mentioned this one line where one of her employees was on the phone with her family in Puerto Rico during the hurricane. And I'm only there for pictures, but I hear this and I latched onto that piece of information and thought, there's a story there. Because if you're on the phone with a relative as a hurricane is happening.
Especially that one, which was, of course, so devastating.
Complete devastation, and the island is still recovering.
Wow.
So I followed up with the director afterwards, and I said, you know, I remember hearing in the conversation that you had mentioned when your employee was on the phone. Would it be possible to get connected with this employee, to talk with her about her story? Mm-hmm. And it all kind of came through, and I had a phone conversation with Myra and Sylvia at first about what they had experienced during the storm, and a couple of days after, when they had no idea if their family was alive or dead.
You know, we're just about out of time, but
sure.
you know, they say it about photographers, and you would know that you know, there's a little bit of luck involved, but there's a lot of skill involved. So if you were in the right place at the right time, that's what they pay you for.
This is true.
Listen, it is a pleasure to have you for the first time on the Bronx Buzz.
Definitely.
Folks, make sure you check out Julius Constantine Motal and the Riverdale Press. His pictures and his work is just fantastic. And guess what? We're going to invite you back. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
All right. And guess what, folks? That is going to end our program. We're too fast out of time. And we will see you next week. Oh, Monday night on Bronx Talk. Wonderful show about some artists. And we're going to combine art and the environment. So that'll be Monday night at 9 on Bronx Talk. Otherwise, make sure you keep watching BronxNet Television. We'll see you soon. Thanks. Good night.
You think getting dumped by text is harsh? Try getting dumped by a tennis ball. My ex-owner drove me out to the woods, yelled fetch, and by the time I brought the ball back, he was gone. Yeah, I was pissed. But the folks at the shelter helped me let go of my anger. I learned coping skills, like taking it to the hole. Boom! Now I'm ready to fetch again. But how about I throw and you run and get it?
Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I am.